American presidents are elected not just on the substance of their policy prescriptions, but also on the strength of their style. This perhaps applies more to Donald Trump than any other president. And aesthetically speaking, he's something quite unique in the annals of American politics. Karen von Hahn is style columnist for the Toronto Star, and she's here to help us comprehend the stylings of U.S. President Donald Trump. Welcome.
Thank you, Nam.
It's nice to see you again, Karen.
Happy to see you.
Before we get into our conversation, I'd like to read a column from the Financial Times. And the columnist writes, "New presidencies have a ferocious cultural knock-on effect. They change how Washington talks, how provincial America sees itself, and what images the word America conjures up abroad. When Obama came to town, Americans who were not used to looking at hip-hop and pop as poetry tuned into will.i.am's music collages of presidential oratory. Makers of cowboy boots saw a bump in sales after George W. Bush took office. Ronald Reagan made it acceptable for the first time for grown men to eat jelly beans." I would think it's okay to eat jelly beans anytime, but whatever. Any hint as what Trump's jelly beans might be?
Well, I think this is an interesting question because it is true that we do look back on every era and it's defined by the leadership. I mean, we even think about history in those terms. The Edwardian era, the Victorian era. The styles are determined by the leadership. So for Trump, I think the way it's looking now is a recherche vulgarity.
What does that mean?
I mean that it's okay to have well-done steak again. It's okay to prefer iceberg lettuce over arugula.
Well, it's interesting because everybody has something to say, it seems, about how he dresses. People have criticized him for his suits being too big, his ties being too long. I mean, I don't understand men's fashion. Is that a bad thing to have a tie that's too long?
Well, his look is extremely artificial. I mean, first of all, we have to describe him accurately as a bit of a cartoon. He's got the weird hair, the sort of trademark signature hair, the too big, ill-fitting suit. I mean, this is a guy who can afford a very good suit. He's said to wear Brioni, and those are extremely expensive.
$5,000 a pop or something?
Extremely expensive. Fabulous cashmere, but on him, it looks terrible. It looks like a big sack. And I think it's really for a reason. What he wants to look like is a great, big, powerful guy, and he also wants to disguise his girth. Because I don't think he's very slender, and I think those big, floppy, long ties, which are like hang maybe 6 inches below his waistline, which is totally wrong, according to
Where's it supposed to go?
It's supposed to come right to your waistline.
Okay.
But he's trying to lengthen his look and distract, you know, the way that a woman might with, you know, vivid applique on a sweater or a pendant.
Or a t-shirt in the pool like I like to do all the time.
It's a distraction technique, the long, flapping tie.
But he seems comfortable, so why are we knocking him? He seems fine with the way he looks.
People don't quite understand that he's projecting an image. You know, politics is a blood sport, and the tools of the trade, the weapons, are images. And people really don't necessarily, you know, his election shows that people don't necessarily pay attention to what is being said so much as how it looks. I mean, that was always the story when President Kennedy went up in a debate on television, one of the earliest televised debates against Nixon, and Nixon presented as a sweaty, clammy, lying creep. You know, there is something in Trump's swagger that America has caught on to, and the swagger is all in his style. So his stylistic choices matter.
And they work, apparently.
Apparently they work. To me, he's an avatar of wealth. You know, Fran Lebowitz had a great line. She said of Trump that he is a poor person's idea of a rich person, which is exactly how he wants to be seen.
I want to show another picture of him, and this is his tie is being held up by tape, which looks really complicated. Wouldn't it have been just easier to get a tie clip? Like, why would he do that?
Well, it's interesting. I think that is a very revealing image. It's like his comb over pretending not to be a comb over. Apparently he does his own hair, by the way. No one else is allowed to touch his hair. It's a signature stylistic thing to wear this extra long tie, and he's chosen. He has all the world at his disposal. He could do anything. He could have a tie pin. He could have a properly. No. He has chosen tape, because that's the kind of guy he is. He's sort of put together cheaply and shoddily, and he's a fake front. So there's something about the tape that is just exactly right.
But maybe to identify with some guy in an office somewhere, he's like, I do that too, like to be like the common guy.
I don't think a lot of people are taping their tie down.
I don't wear ties.
I think it's a bit of a weird tick. He's trying to look pulled together, but it's a bit of a house of cards.
Well, GQ reimagined him. They gave him a makeover, and here is the result. An improvement?
Well, the GQ look, I think, it's definitely more au courant. You know, he looks more modern in this version. He's got, in GQ's imagination, a much trimmer silhouette, a tighter fitting suit, a shorter tie, a tie pin, and a little handkerchief, which is a little, you know, nod to a bit of a retro Mad Men kind of look. So it's both more modern with kind of a nostalgic overtone. Yeah, he looks more pulled together. They've also given him a normal haircut.
And I think they've toned down the...
They've toned down the brassy apricot hue. But the thing is, he would never go for that look because he doesn't want to look more modern. He wants to make America great again. You know, in days before there were metrosexuals running around, he wants to look like a man, you know, and a very sort of retro recherche idea of what that is.
But some would argue, like with the GQ makeover, would they do this to Trump if it was Hillary, if it was a woman?
Oh my goodness, they didn't stop about Hillary and her pantsuits and her hairstyles and her makeovers. It was relentless, the attention to actually any female politician in terms of her looks. So I think it's actually high time that we looked at men and how they look in office.
It has been said that Donald Trump combines working class tastes with a billionaire's budget. Do you agree?
Yes, I think so. I think that's part of his appeal because I think what he speaks to is the aspirations of people who, ordinary Americans. There's a character in the Monopoly game by Parker Brothers, Uncle Pennybags, you know, that he was that with the sort of top hat and
the cane.
And the cane. And I think he's sort of playing to this. That's what's very modern, on the other hand, about Trump and very 21st century, that he is an avatar of this type of aspiration. He represents wealth even more than he is rich, which is arguably why he hasn't yet presented his tax returns, because he might not even be as rich as he looks or seems.
But it is noted that he grew up in a wealthy family, so he was anything but working class. So how do you explain the reality behind this perception?
I think it's all in his presentation. You know, he's never fit in with New York society. He's never been, for instance, known as any sort of philanthropist. He's never given any money to the arts. If he's really that rich, it's sort of hard to fathom. I think he's definitely the outsider to high society. And he's sort of the vulgarian, you know, Graydon Carter, the editor of Vanity Fair, and one of the late writer, A.A. Gill, call him a short-fingered vulgarian, which of course he has to respond to by being insulted about the size of his fingers, because we all know what that means, you know.
What does it mean? No, that's another conversation for another time. Melania.
Well, manliness being primary and being great again.
Well, Melania, in some circles, is already a fashion icon.
Yes.
Her inauguration outfits, people were talking about them. What's your take on her?
Well, it was interesting. I mean, it's that picture of her looking very sad, that meme, sort of a liberal position that the poor woman is a princess locked in some Trump tower, you know, is a bit, has sort of taken off, and we should all feel sorry for her.
The hashtag Free Melania?
Free Melania. I think that the dress speaks to the choices that she's made because there's a fakery in it. It's extremely tailored. It's Ralph Lauren, who appears to have no political affiliations.
Yeah, because a lot of designers have refused to dress her.
Yeah, it's Ralph Lauren, and he also has dressed Hillary, and dressed Hillary all through the campaign as well. So, so that's interesting. But it recalls Jackie O, you know, at the inauguration of JFK in 1961. Well, the tailored, very tightly tailored look, her upswept hairdo is very much the reminder of the pillbox. So it's playing on certain icons of a great time in American history, a hopeful time in American history. But this is no Camelot. This is the opposite of Camelot. And so it's sort of a bit of a sad image to me.
Well, here's someone said that Melania Trump, they described her as being a Rorschach test in Louboutins. What does she bring to the presidential tableau? Like, what is her role?
I don't think she had bargained for this position. She was like, rich guy, sure. Old rich guy, great. New York penthouse, fine. But the White House, ooh, it's a little much for her.
Well, Melania's friend had this to say about Melania. Her task is all the more complex because the president is the perpetual star of his own one-man show. He dances alone. he's not into the tango. So does the fact that Melania is his wife matter at all to the brand that Trump is trying to project?
Well, absolutely. I mean, part of this sort of America Great Again, recherche idea is that women are to be objectified. They're arm candy. And he's got the ultimate arm candy. I mean, she is beautiful. She's perfect. She's the most groomed, poised, physically poised specimen you will ever see. But there is something sort of almost frightening in her presentation, and that of actually Ivanka too, if you ask me, and all the other Trump women in the family. They have a sort of sex bot kind of presentation. They're all often dressed in these very tight-fitting sheaths to show their bodies, as well as, you know, very high stilettos, almost like a Barbie. They're really like a male vision of what a woman should be. Seen and not really heard, you know, with no particular personality laid into the factor. You know, there's no individuality. They're a bit of a sort of a cult army of women.
Let's take a look at a few images from the third floor apartment in Trump Tower. Here's the sizable living room. I mean, that could be my whole apartment.
But that's part of it, man.
How grand it is. Let's take a look at a tea setting for your 100 friends who will come over for tea and biscuits.
Yes, well, the very key element here is the amount of gold. Okay?
I read that there's actually gold, like
yes.
it's on the walls and stuff,
and there
like
are
in the
gold
paintings.
Toilets, okay? Gold toilets in this apartment.
How do you clean a gold toilet?
I don't know.
A corridor bathed in gold.
Well, they look for the gold here, the marble.
When you look at that, what does this interior tell you about the person that lives there?
Well, it's really trying to express sort of intimidation, the intimidation that should be associated with wealth and power. So the materials are expensive, gauchely expensive, rubbing it in your face expensive, marble, glass. You know, things have to be polished and groomed here to look this spanking fabulous all the time by a whole flotilla of people who must do it every minute and run away. So this is all about power and the expression of power and money and wealth. The British decorator, Nicky Haslam, who's incredibly witty and who writes for FT on style, calls it Louis the Hotel, the style, which I think is exactly right, because it is sort of borrowed from the French style of Versailles, which was, you know, the first example in how to intimidate with wealth and grandeur.
Well, some years ago, a writer, Peter York, published a book featuring photographs of houses which belonged to various dictators. Here's one that used to be the home of Viktor Yanukovych, who ruled Ukraine until he was made to flee to Russia in 2014. And here are the palatial digs in Baghdad. They belong to the late president of Iraq, Saddam Hussein. Peter York claims that Trump's homes feature elements that are part and parcel of what he calls dictator chic. Can you summarize for us what these elements are?
Well, it's marble and more marble. It's expensive materials. I mean, I was interested to learn that the decorator of Trump's own penthouse is a guy who's famous for doing casinos. And I really think that last picture of Yanukovych's foyer, and the place was just palatial. It's now a museum since it was taken over by the people. But there's something about the scale of the project where a casino designer would be exactly the right person to approach it. So it's the wow factor.
So the size is one element. What
size
else?
is one element. The materials being glitzy, shiny, new. So it's all reproduction. You know, these aren't actual true antiques. These aren't valuable items.
But why, if you have the money, why wouldn't you get those
because
antiques?
True antiques are puny in scale. People were smaller. Right. Okay, they're not shiny. In fact, they're sort of shabby looking. Those pieces tend to be sort of low impact and restrained. So these aren't things, even though they are valuable, they don't speak of value in the way that something that is a reproduction would.
So scale, material, and what else?
Scale, material, a reproduction as opposed to a new and shiny. There's also certain motifs that you see that are common throughout these types of interiors. They're all heroic. They're all things like columns that recall ancient Greece, or heroic beasts wrangling someone, or naked figures that recall ancient, Rome. These things that are sort of triumphal. Eagles, they love eagles. Dictators love eagles, and they love gold. And
more
marble.
gold. Yeah.
The more gold, the better.
Well, as you describe in your published memoir, What Remains, you grew up amongst some of the most wealthy people in Toronto. Maybe not Trump wealthy, but pretty wealthy. Does that give you a better insight into how money makes Trump tick?
Well, what I really tried to do in my book is discuss the meaning of objects a little bit. And some of the objects are fancy and some of them are not so fancy. But I think we have come to sort of understand others through what they collect and what they admire, and that's sort of an expression of their aspirations and what they hold dear. So sure, being surrounded by beautiful things gave me some insight into matters of taste, and I do talk about that in the book, but moreover, it's really given me insight into the meaning of objects and what people are trying to say about themselves in what they hold dear.
And what is Trump saying about himself?
He is saying, don't mess with me. He is saying politics is a blood sport and I am a winner. I take no prisoners. There's no such thing as restraint, as in my book. It's not necessary. And that this is an expression really of who he is individually, who he is as a person. And he wants to express those ideas.
I'm sure that there are people who are watching us that support Trump, and they're probably watching and getting probably irritated, might be calling you a liberal snob and passing judgment on more traditional taste.
Sure.
Isn't it just a matter of taste, or are some tastes better than others?
I think there are such things as good and bad taste. It's not that I am angry with Trump because he's vulgar. It's that his politics and his position are really about branding himself. And as far as I can see it, what he is doing is cashing in on this presidency and this opportunity. It's all been an expression of the Trump brand. Their reaction, the official reaction to any negative comments about the administration was to go out and buy Ivanka's stuff. And I think that's what we're really seeing. These are people who are going to take this as an opportunity for themselves. And that's why I don't think we should mince words about this particular administration. And if I'm guilty of liberal snobbery here, my snobbery is against people who would use their position to such goals.
Well, columnist Christopher Caldwell wrote in Financial Times just before the inauguration, prepare for a mashup of Sinatra, sports stars, and reality TV. What do you say?
I say,
speaking about Trump,
I say he's right on, but I would also say that this is sort of the end result of a culture of narcissism, where we're all involved in this process of self-imaging through Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. He's the result. That's what we've ended up with. He's the male Paris Hilton or Kim Kardashian, and more powerful.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Karen. Your memoir, What Remains, was just published, and we're going to be talking about it during the agenda in the summer.
Look forward to seeing it.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.